Hey, hope you're all having a good weekend. Got a little bit of scorpion footage last night. This was about 5:30 a.m. and you can see it right down there under the UV light. Yeah, those things like to hang out in leaf litter, especially where you have like a lot of pine trees. And here's a bird for you to identify. We hear that a lot on the Great Plains, especially up in Oklahoma. That's a chuck-will's widow. And that call, we used to call it the Frito burrito bird. But, yeah, it sounds, it's got different sounds to different people, and chuck-will's widow, I guess, is mostly what they go with. But that's the view outside. Trying to find the bird there, but anyway. So that's your ornithology lesson and your crustacean lesson, and we'll get to the charts here. And we've got southeasterly flow across the Gulf Coast. So the Gulf is open up, and we've got southeasterly flow. And since we have a mid-level low-pressure area, that means we've got a pretty ripe environment for the sea breeze to make a little bit of progress inland, and we kind of see that right here in Louisiana, Shreveport, in through the Lufkin area of Texas. But still pretty dry in the Great Plains itself. Let me try to bring up the dew points. We do have plenty of moisture. We've got 60s to maybe 65, 66 degree dew points, and definitely a dry line. So this means we've got capping. So there's about where the dry line is right now. Roughly just right down the Cap Rock all the way to Midland. Okay. Further up the plains, we do have some storm action up in the Lake Superior area, and that's near the northern cusp of the moisture. We've got dew points up near 70 all the way up to Minneapolis and up to northern Wisconsin. And we've got a squall line up in that area. And I brought up the GR level 2 data. A few severe thunderstorm warnings. Mostly looking at penny-sized hail, 60-mile-an-hour gusts. Doesn't look like anything too serious here, but this time of year we do have the potential for bow echoes and derechos. That's the main threat. And these storms have a little bit of an appearance like that. We'll check out the velocity. And getting lots of range folding in here, but seeing spots of maybe, let's see here, how much is that? 15, 17 knots, 29 knots anyway. That's pretty far from the radar, so I can't really pick out much from that. But there's the tail end of the front right there. Showers all the way down to the northern Iowa area. Small slight risk there for northern Wisconsin and up on the high plains here, just north of Denver. Doesn't look like anything's really developed there, but we have had some wind reports with that bow echo, derecho thing. So it looks like that's left a little bit of a swath of severe weather there. Can definitely see that. Okay, let's see here. Long wave patterns. What we saw last week was a big ridge across the central U.S. keeping things shut down. We had a long wave trough off the west coast and the east coast. We've had a bit of a pattern shift, and you see what happens here. We've kind of broken down the ridge, and now we're getting a long wave trough out west, and some long wave troughing up in the Northwest Territories right here. So that's helping to increase the westerly flow a little bit and digging into the tropics a little bit, bringing in some moisture from the southwest. Here's the 250 millibar chart for this morning, where we can get a better look at that. Polar front jet coming around from Vancouver Island up to San Francisco, up to the Dakotas, and up to James Bay. And definitely a subtropical jet right down here. Right from about Tucson to Albuquerque, and then we kind of lose that a bit, maybe pick it up around Del Rio, maybe around Monterey. So down there in the southern border states. And just off to the east, we've got an upper level low over the Shreveport area. That's helping to generate some of those showers that we saw during the opening part of the webcast. You can see the temperatures up aloft, a little bit cooler associated with that low, minus 47 there at Jackson. And we can probably see that a little bit better up at 500 millibars. Yeah, we got minus 8s here. Lake Charles and Shreveport. So that'll help out your Cape a little bit. We lose the low around 700 millibars, and we've just got southerly winds across the plains. And then at 850, this is where we start looking for the low-level jet. Looks like we've got a little bit of that right here. From about Sanderson up to Amarillo, up to Omaha, maybe about 35 to up to 55 knots there at Dodge City. So this is one of the missing links of the return flow. Certainly started up at the surface and also showing up here at 850. And then at 925 we can see a little bit of that 40-knot flow all up and down the I-35 corridor here. So that's bringing up some of the moisture from the south. Let me skip way ahead and show the precipitable water. Try to figure out where I put that chart. Yeah, here we go. Here's the GFS precipitable water. We'll take a look at what's upstream here. Looks like South Texas is pretty well tapped out. We've only got maybe an inch of precipitable water. That ridge that we've had along the Gulf Coast has kept things pretty... it's pushed a lot of the moisture well to the south. We've had north winds along the Mexican coast there, so it has made a big impact, but good tropical moisture there in the Yucatan. Let's see if that makes it up north. We'll just run the model forward here. And it looks like it takes a little bit of time, but by the time we get up to Tuesday and Wednesday, we're bringing up the 1.5 to 2 inch precipitable waters up into the Great Plains. So moisture is a problem. Now, here's one other thing. You see this here down out in the Caribbean? These are 2-inch totals. Let me go all the way back to the beginning. You can see that even the Caribbean is kind of scoured out here. And you can watch... Let me move the chart a little bit. Yeah, watch as these 2-inch precipitable waters start ejecting northwestward into the Caribbean around midweek and approaching the Gulf of Mexico there towards the weekend and possibly up to the Gulf Coast about 10 days from now. But we do see a tropical system along the Mexican coast right there. There's a lot of variability with all the different models. The Canadian model bringing it more this way. The old GFS was similarly doing that. The new GFS bringing it more this way. We'll have to see what happens with that, but that could be one of the first tropical systems to affect Texas this summer. Latest GFS not doing much with that, but bringing a bit of a slug of moisture onto the Texas coast there later in the month. Okay, back to the charts. Let's see here. We've got the sea breeze opening up across Texas. Very weak, but you can see few CBs working up through the Lufkin-Nacogdoches area, laying down a little bit of an anvil there. This is all kind of the sea breeze here. Looks like a little bit more well-developed way out towards Monroe. And even though we have lots of moisture near the surface, 60s dew points, we are pretty well capped. Either that or the moisture is pretty shallow. We'll take a look at the skew-ts. And then for the northern plains, here's Wisconsin. So Minneapolis, St. Paul, right in this area here. They've had the line go through earlier. But you do see not much of a low cloud field ahead of this line of showers and thunderstorms. Maybe a little one right in this area, but pretty clear out in this area. So this is suggestive of higher cloud bases, higher LCLs, and this could correspond to a slightly greater wind threat. Dry air always means the possibility for downburst winds. And here's the water vapor imagery. Here's the second wave moving through Louisiana. Some drier air coming around the west side in the mid-levels right there. And then on the other side, we've got a little bit of moisture coming up northward from the Gulf of Mexico onto the Gulf Coast right there. Elsewhere around the U.S., let's see. Looks like the West Coast getting into the prevailing westerlies there. This looks a little bit more winter-like. So we're getting the polar front jet kind of set up through this area right here. And we'll see what the models do with that. Thickness and isobars. Let's see. We've got a lot of weather going on out in the West Coast. See the cold pool there over Northern California. I think that's about maybe 546 decameters there. Pretty cold. Pretty cold column there. We'll try to grab a sounding there for Sacramento. I guess we'll have to take Oakland or Reno. But out ahead of that, this is the warm desert air in between cold front. So very well-defined cold front working its way through the Great Basin area right now. And then the other end of that up through Minnesota into Wisconsin like that. And that's kind of the picture there, what's happening across the U.S. Out ahead of this frontal system, we've got maybe a bit of a thermal low across Colorado there, lee side low, with the increasing westerly component, and the Gulf opening up a little bit here, bringing the moisture northward. And where that moisture intersects the front, that's a good region for thunderstorm development. Okay, we'll take a look at soundings. Let's try checking out Reno there near that cold core low. Well, we definitely see the lower tropopause there. There's some mid-level moisture out in this area. Rather warm in the upper levels, but near the surface, we've got a pretty cold column here, and we can see 7-8 Celsius there at the surface. That's going to be about 43, 45 Fahrenheit. It's definitely some very cold air, and we'll check out Oakland. Also a cold column there, 54 at the surface, and low tropopause there, and you can see the presence of the polar front jet there with 100 knots at about 32,000 feet. And by contrast, out in the plains, we'll take a look at, let's see, we'll try Davenport. Out ahead of the line, looks like some fairly decent moisture there, about 12 grams per kilogram here. That's going to correspond to low 60s dew points. It's not very high, actually, for this time of year, but it is moisture. And then you can see the capping here between 800 and 700 millibars. So that's the reason why we don't have widespread thunderstorm activity across the plains. I'm sure most everywhere we go, we're going to see a bit of that capping there in the mid-levels. All right, let's see here. Let's see, I had a frame up here for the northern plains, and I think I might have lost it. Okay, I'll just show you the high-resolution rapid refresh for tonight for Texas, and then I'll move that up north. The general trend overnight. Little MCS there in Louisiana with that upper level low. Looks like it starts falling apart overnight. And then going for a little bit of new development during the morning hours in East Texas. So it might be kind of cloudy, maybe a few showers east of I-35. We'll have to watch for that tomorrow. Maybe that low is retrogressing or something. And then for the northern plains, let me go up to the Midwest. We'll see what that MCS up there is doing. I'm not too sure that this has a good handle on the position of this system, because we've got it on this model forecast from about Minneapolis up to, I guess, Ontonagon or Marquette. And the radar has that a little bit further south. You can see there's a difference there. Model has it up here, and real data has it further south. But we can look at just at the overall trend and see what happens. Trend is to scoot that quickly eastward into the Sault Ste. Marie area, maybe a little redevelopment along the tail end. Then a quiet night, maybe some redevelopment further west. This looks like an old MCS, maybe from the High Plains, probably falling apart there in northern Iowa. Well, looks like it regenerates later during the morning in the Minneapolis area, but that's along the tail end of that polar front there. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to go and look at the dew points. It's always a good thing to look at this time of year. And let me take a look at the chat, see what we got going on here. Sue M, 93 degrees, sunny in southern Indiana. Alexi checking in, fun with tech, and Eddie W is here. Ryan drying out there in Florida. John Buma, scorcher in Visio. Hot and humid, sticky South Florida evening there. John Buma in the Chicago metro area. Robert Terrell saying hello to everybody. Let's see some guesses on that bird that we were showing earlier, the Chuckwill's widow. The other big bird that I used to see back in Oklahoma was not the Chuckwill's widow, but also the phoebe. That had a very distinctive call. We used to have a bunch of those when I lived out in the country there. I haven't noticed any phoebes here in Texas, but I'll have to bring up the call for that sometime. Not so hot here in Denver, according to Mike Estwick. Burl H is here. Brian says the storms left us alone today, and South Florida blew up good around Central Florida, Orlando. And they do need more rain than Southern Florida. A ton of moisture in the Gulf and the Caribbean, pushing moisture northward with high dew points. Sarah Wood in Indiana, up north, thinks they've gone directly into summer. Ryan says this time of the year, the steering currents in the Gulf of Mexico brings and pushes the tropical storm systems into the north and the northeast. So we'll be watching for that. Michael Burrell checking in. Ryan says the Alabama-Florida panhandle usually takes the full brunt of those storm systems. Ground very dry where Burl H is in Iowa. Justin Pulliam saying hello, and Juggalo for Life made it in. Okay. Run things forward here. We'll start out with tomorrow's conditions. Looks like we've got more moisture making it north. Remember, the purple is 70s dew points, and we've got a lot of that all the way from the Gulf Coast up to the Midwest. And I think we're looking at maybe a warm front from about Minneapolis into the Yankton area to western Nebraska, maybe something like that. Dry line from North Platte down to Dodge City, down the Caprock. So depending on how much capping, how little capping we have, possibility for storms anywhere in this area right here. Then let's see here, by Tuesday, we have a new storm system coming together in the Dakotas. Warm front continuing to hang on there in Minnesota. Looks like a new cold front maybe moving southward through Nebraska, and then maybe some sort of dry line down through western Oklahoma into the San Angelo area. So the northern system mostly moves northeast, and we end up with the Gulf Coast onshore flow starting to target the Texas Panhandle on Wednesday. See that very strong cyclogenesis there in the Texas Panhandle right there. Got that back flow there in Kansas. Maybe some sort of baroclinic boundary through there. So we may see storm chances going up there in the Panhandles and southwestern Kansas around midweek. It looks like that system starts coming together pretty good Thursday and Friday. And looks like one of those waves lifts northeastward. You can see the response in the low-level flow now going up to Kansas and Iowa. So that's kind of following the wave as it moves up the frontal boundary. By Saturday, things kind of pointing up at Missouri there. New cold front coming south. So this is probably spelling an MCS there over the weekend there in Missouri and southeastern Kansas there. And dry line set up in Texas from about Oklahoma City southward to around Brownwood to San Antonio. Then we get some pretty good cyclogenesis late in the weekend. You can see what we have is pretty much a synoptic scale cyclogenesis area in the southern plains. Probably have a cold front oriented something like that. Possibly severe weather for Oklahoma, northwest Oklahoma, out in this area here, and near the intersection of the dry line with that boundary there. And possibly some upslope flow storms from the Raton Mesa area out to the Oklahoma Panhandle. Stagnant weather pattern for Sunday and Monday. East-west boundary there along the Interstate 40 corridor. And then we start developing some southerly flow once again through the Great Plains Tuesday, Wednesday. So more thunderstorms, and the model starts pulling this tropical storm into the picture in the western Gulf Coast region. Looks like it makes landfall south of Brownsville, down in this area here. But I'm sure we're going to see the model kind of flip-flopping on that as the days go on. And new strong cold front coming down around the 22nd, all the way down to Texas. So I think we're going to have some continued chances for thunderstorms in the central and southern plains mid-month into about the third week of June. See, there goes another system heading southward. That's pretty well developed right there. So I guess if you've got outdoor projects in the Texas-Oklahoma area, probably better get that finished up while you can there. Things look a little bit wet. And that brings us to the end of the sequence, and that's probably about all I got. I'll take a look at the chat here. Looks like 85 degrees there in Denver from Mike Estwick. Lloyd McCarter waiting for the moisture to make it across Texas to increase storm chances in North Little Rock. He can set up his camera there from Fort Roots Mountain. Yeah, Little Rock, my grandparents used to live there up in Pulaski Heights up on Lee Avenue. Got a lot of good memories there, and I remember a few storms there. Track and tornado watches there in western Arkansas way back in the old days. Okay, that's probably about all I got for tonight. I'll keep it kind of short. Hope you all have a good evening, and we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, 8 o'clock, and we'll see you then. Take care.